Hello everyone. In this demo, we're going to look at determining a sum with a while loop. So the goal in this program is going to be to let the user input a list of positive integers as long as they want, and then track the sum of that list. And then they'll indicate that they're done by either inputting a 0 or a negative number at the end. So to get things started, we'll definitely need at least two variables for this process. We'll declare one num just for the number the user enters at each step, and also one to track the sum. Now, I definitely know the sum should start at a value of 0. It's an important consideration to make. If you don't give that an initial value, you'll actually be tallying the sum potentially on a garbage value. So again, make sure to initialize variables correctly. Most of the time when you're finding a sum, 0 tends to work as a good initial value. So what we'll do is start a loop that's controlled by that condition that says when the user's done. As long as they're inputting something that's, again, positive, this process should repeat. So we'll say while num is greater than 0, we'll allow them to input a number, update the sum, and then repeat that process until they input a negative. So we'll put a prompt line here. We'll say cout enter a value. We'll let them input the value for that step. And then, again, we'll just make sure we'll check that this process works at this stage. So one issue to consider is this loop is controlled from the value of num, which does not have an initial value up here. This should definitely go at least once. We want to let the user input at least one number in the process. So we could give num a starting value that would cause the loop to go. I'm going to initialize num to be 1. Again, that's only a decision I made to cause this loop to definitely go. Then this loop will come in, ask for a number, and if they input a negative right away, the process would stop. So again, in designing these programs that have multiple steps, it's a good idea to stop, build as you go along, and make sure things are working correctly. So let's make sure that this loop lets us input numbers until we enter a negative. So good, the loop popped up. Enter a value, we'll say 2, should go again. Enter a value, we'll say 5, should go again. Enter a value, we'll say -4, and the loop should stop at that point. Okay, good. So at this point, I think we definitely can safely say like this loop processes input correctly. Now, what else do we need to do? We need to track the sum of the numbers that the user entered as we're going along here. So what we'll do at each step is assign sum to be the old sum value plus whatever value the user just entered. That's definitely one way to write it. Although this happens so often where you update a variable based on its old value, you might remember those shortcut operators that we've used. So I'm going to write that as sum plus equals num. And again, just in comment form, it's the same as sum equals sum plus num. Again, that happens so often in these types of algorithms that people just use that plus equals operator as a shortcut for that. All right, so let's build this and see what happens at this point. So let's do a one number list. Enter a value 5, we'll do -3, and actually there's no output for that. I gotta put an output statement down here. I almost overlooked that. So at the end we'll say cout, the sum of the positive integers you entered is sum, and we'll give that an end-L or 2. Okay, let's try that again. So same test case, enter a value 5, enter a value, we'll say -3, and the sum of the positive integers in that list should just be 5. Okay, so we're seeing the value 2 display here, and you want to take a minute to think about why that's happening. So this loop, the value of 1 just causes that to go right away, so I don't think it's the 1 that's the issue. Enter a value, user enters 5, sum plus equals num happens, so the sum value did get updated to 5 at that step. Now they just input a positive number, so that means there's potential to want to go again. So enter a value, the user input -3, and this sum statement was being updated in that case. So we actually need to put a control on this. We'll introduce a branch that says if the value of num is actually something positive, that means they do want to keep updating the sum, and we'll put this statement below that if heading. So again, this would just be a branch. This if statement is just purely here to control the fact that the user has to enter a negative number or 0 to end it. I don't want that number going into that sum value. So let's rebuild this and see if it works with that same case of just entering 5 and -3. Enter 5, enter -3, and the sum of the positive integers you entered is 5. Okay, great. Okay, let's try a slightly longer list just to make sure things are working well. So we'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll end it with -1. So let's see, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. I believe that is 10. So this looks like it's working pretty well. I chose not to echo in this program just because I think it would be a little bit overkill to display the number right back to the user at each step. Again, this is a pretty common sort of algorithm that I have to design is a loop that's sort of controlled based on a number the user entered. That's sometimes called a sentinel value. 0 or a negative would be a value that causes this loop to end. And just be mindful that this decision up here was made purely to cause this loop to have to go at least once. My other option could have been to not give num the initial value of 1 and ask for the first number out of a loop. That's definitely another very fine design choice. The only thing with that is you're kind of repeating these 2 lines of code outside the loop. Again, nothing wrong with that by any stretch, but it would also probably affect the design within the loop as well. So just be thoughtful about this loop is controlled from num. Num didn't have an initial value. Let's just give it a value to cause it to go, and then this process starts.